Let's go ahead and welcome in our political panel. Joel Rubin is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, and Ravi Agrawal is the Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy magazine. Good morning to both of you. Joel, we're going to start with you here. You worked in the State Department. Which priorities, when we laid out all of the things that they need to be doing at this summit and maybe the things on the president's personal agenda, which priorities do you think he needs to focus on while he's abroad?
Well, Lindsay, thank you for having me. And this really is a demonstration of the priority of the American worker and the American middle class. And what Joe Biden is doing on the world stage is advancing those goals of trying to make sure that our economy is built back better, trying to ensure that the United States is leading through a democratic process, and making sure that the investments for combating climate change, for example, are robust, and making sure that the world follows these. So those are the real priorities: showing leadership abroad and showing the American people that he can deliver abroad for them at home.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we'll point out, Ravi, that we have these polls lately that show the international reputation of U.S. leadership taking a hit the last few years. How do you imagine that Biden's doing when it comes to restoring that?
Well, a lot of this is going to be in terms of, what actually emerges over the next few days. I think he'll be, on the one hand, working to make sure that there are tangible deliverables and takeaways, in terms of, moving the needle on climate commitments. I think that will matter. I think being able to sort of promise more in terms of aid to countries that are trying to vaccinate their people, or instead of aid, maybe vaccines themselves. Those are the kinds of things that I think that countries will look for around the world to get a sense that Biden is actually delivering when he says that America is back. But more than all of that, I think behind the scenes, Biden will be trying to smooth over relations with countries to assure, the French, for example, that the recent kerfuffle between the two countries is no more. Macron, the president of France, is going to look for some concrete examples of American commitment to that relationship. And I think amid all of this, it's important to note, as you all have, that China's president and Putin of Russia are not going to be there in person. I think that, too, is an opportunity of sorts for President Biden to, maybe step it up a bit with the leaders who are there, because they won't be looking over their shoulders to try and have their separate meetings in person with Xi or Putin.
Joel, what do you have to say to that? How much of an opportunity is this for President Biden with the Russian and Chinese leaders not attending in person?
Yeah, I think Ravi is absolutely right. This is a signal that they don't want to play at this moment with the rest of the international community, and that the United States, that the G-20 is being driven by a democratic agenda. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Joe Biden. And we have to remember that right now we're at the 9th month, essentially, of this administration. There's been a lot of cleanup up until now, the transition away from Donald Trump, the broken relationships abroad, the insurrection at home, still dealing with the pandemic. And so we now see the Biden agenda actually moving in a direction where he has wanted to go for some time. We're in a situation where democracy is the driving mantra of this White House when it comes to international engagement. Not having China and Russia there, fine, that's okay. They're part of the global economy, but on this agenda, this is one that the democracies are leading, and the United States at the forefront.
Hey, Ravi, is there anything to read into the fact that President Biden had a 90-minute meeting with the Pope as opposed to just 30 minutes or 33 minutes, I believe the case was, with former President Trump?
Well, I think in as much as, Biden is Catholic, I think he wanted to show that, his faith matters to him, that this meeting is more than just a diplomatic meeting. It's a personal meeting. I think that's something that was important for him personally. And I think it's an important takeaway for the world to see as well. The Pope is going to be meeting many other world leaders who are visiting. Some of those meetings might be a little bit more contentious, such as the Pope's meeting with India's Prime Minister Modi. There have been attacks on Christians in India, and I think that might come up for discussion. So in a sense, this is a chat that I think Biden is quite happy to have. We don't know yet exactly what they've discussed. I imagine the issue of abortion might have come up. But all in all, it's clear that, faith is important to President Biden.
Joel, talking about climate, we know that this is going to be one of the pillars here for the summit. And we also know that the president really wanted a win with Build Back Better to go to this summit with better standing. Knowing that there's not necessarily text of the bill yet, but there is a commitment, and the president says he is confident that he can get something passed. And the fact that climate really is one of the hallmarks here of this new legislation once it's written out. Does he come into this summit from a place of weakness or strength when it comes to climate change and action?
Thanks, Lindsay. This bill, the Build Back Better bill, it has $550 billion dedicated to combating climate change. It's a tremendous opportunity for the United States. And so we're seeing a synchronicity with Joe Biden. Publicly at Glasgow, he'll go and speak about the climate agreement. But here at home, he'll get these investments. Next week, all indications are that these bills are going to pass, that we're going to see the climate provisions, the most sweeping climate provisions in the history of the United States, passed by the Congress, moved into law. It's really going to transform our economy here at home. So while he didn't get it completely done legislatively yesterday, the wind is at his backs. Democrats are all supportive of these. They're good for the United States. And it's just a matter of ironing out the process next week to get the final victory.
Sure, somebody's going to read in, by the way, as I look at this class photo, to the staging of it all. The U.S. president is usually up front and center. It appears that Joe Biden is off to the left. Maybe some of our neighbors around here will be making a whole hoop about that in the next few days. Joe and Ravi, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
The surprising number of parents